All right. Well, Happy New Year. I'm just kidding. Doesn't it feel like the year is just now starting? It's January 21st. And I slept like a baby yesterday. I didn't get out of bed. I think I actually overslept. I didn't get out of bed till like 9:30 this morning. I'm normally up by like 7:30. Actually, I woke up at like 7 and looked at my phone. I was like, nah, I'm going back to sleep. And I slept so soundly, so peacefully. And it seems like that's, the same sort of sentiment that's being shared all around. I noticed amongst friends, family members on social media, for the most part, unless you are, I guess, a Trump supporter for some reason still. Then yeah, it kind of sucks for you. Or if you're a member of QAnon, sorry, sucks. I want to say empathize. I don't know what it's like to worship somebody so intensely, that especially a politician so intensely that your identity is like super tied into their failures and or successes. I saw a video on Twitter of this lady that was crying after, about the inauguration, I'm guessing. I don't know. I didn't really listen to what she was saying, but one of my friends was like, one of my friends was telling me that she was using Trump and God interchangeably. And I was just like, wow, that's scary is the word that comes to mind. Sad is another word that comes to mind. Terrifying is a word. But she like legit had a full-blown meltdown. And that's unfortunate. And I guess there's a temptation for some to look at her situation and be like, okay, well, turnabout's fair play. For the last 4 years, we were taunted with, this sort of echoing chant of F your feelings and, I drink liberal tears. And so people are sort of seeing her anguish, and there's this desire to retaliate in a way. And my friend who asked me about the video asked me what I thought about it. And I was like, what's the expression? An eye for an eye leaves the world blind. It's just, I'm exhausted now. All I wanted, and I think I said this a few episodes, ago, definitely leading up to the election in November last year, was all I wanted was for Trump to be gone so I can go back to not giving a shit about politics ever again. And mission accomplished. I feel like I've done my part. I did my part. And voted, encouraging my friends to vote, talking about it on the podcast, all of that. I feel like I've done my part. And so I'm actually looking forward to going back to not giving a fuck about what's happening. I know that sounds horrible, but it's like, come on, guys, it's politics. Politics is a very seedy, sketchy environment. It's never been, clean. You know what I mean? And, there's that saying, when you wrestle with a pig, you'll both get dirty, but the pig will enjoy it. And sure enough, you're seeing this wishy-washiness from Lindsey Graham saying one thing last week, now he's saying something else. Mitch McConnell saying one thing literally yesterday, now today he's saying something else. It's not going to, it doesn't end, And if you don't pause and re-examine where you are, you'll get sucked in. And it's this just never-ending sort of cesspool of, criticism, emotional violence, negativity. It's not going to stop because there's always going to be something, and there's always going to be people to criticize, and there's always going to be a policy that you don't agree with. And do you really want to put that in your soul, consume that and be consumed by that every day, for another 4 years, for another 8 years, till you die, however you want to look at it. I don't. I've had my fill. I can have a quick flashback, and I've recorded it on the podcast as well, of people that I've, that I care about, that I have argued with or, yelled at or called names because, for whatever reason, at least leading up to the election and then after the fact, the insurrection, it just we're still kind of supporting and or defending Trump. And it's just, that's not the version of myself that I see myself developing into. I don't want to be that person. I'm not happy in that state. I don't know anybody who is. And just for purely like aesthetic reasons, I look at politicians who've been in politics for a long time and they're not aging well. They don't seem happy. It's just, I'm good. And I hope I didn't, I'm not trying to be offensive. I'm not attempting, this is not my attempt at virtue signaling. People are going to do what they're going to do. And I understand why they are doing that, because to a certain point, it's like, what else is there to do? You sort of feel powerless, and then you have social media. And a lot of the times, when you do engage and you communicate with other people who also feel the same way, it feels good. And it becomes addictive. And people complain about, oh, you're just setting up like echo chambers and you're just talking to people who think just like you. So the fuck what? Like, yeah, I enjoy talking to people that agree with me. I don't know what is necessarily bad about echo chambers. I mean, that's kind of how friendships are built, right? Like if I meet somebody that I didn't know before and then we just start agreeing on like, our favorite movies and favorite foods and where we like to travel, and we're going back and forth and we're kind of aligned and saying the same thing, you could argue that, okay, that's a quote unquote echo chamber, but it feels good to find people that, you can establish this sort of rapport with and agree, with. And like I said in the previous episodes, people have built communities around that. Unfortunately, a lot of these communities tend to now be centered around hate and a bit of delusion. But it speaks to the human need for a tribe. So this is not my attempt to criticize anybody at all. That's not even the purpose of this podcast, really. It's just to say personally, it's time to move on for me. Hopefully, I feel like every time I say this and something fucked up happens and then I have to be like, oh no. I hope not. I hope that, I'm not going to say what I'm going to say because I don't want to jinx anything, but I just, I'm ready to move on. And if the thought has crossed your mind and you kind of wondered, what, is this a good use of my time? Going on social media and just being just negative all the time and criticizing and, all of that every day for hours on end, I find some sort of solace in the fact that you're not alone in questioning if this is what you want to do with your life and with your time, because I'm with you there. It's not enjoyable for me anymore. I don't like the way I feel when I do it. And there's just more important things. There's just other things in this world, in this big, interesting, beautiful world that, I can focus my time, energy, and effort into trying to figure out or decipher or even connect with people on some level. So that's my take on all of that. But I am glad and I'm happy that, things went swimmingly. I saw articles from all over the world of people saying, welcome back, America. You just feel this immense sense of relief, and I am grateful for that. And so for all of you who are listening, who also, did your part, as a citizen of this country or a resident of this country, and you went out and either voted or encouraged people to vote, or just, were on social media and you took that, into yourself. You took the negativity into yourself. But it was obviously for a greater good, what we thought was a greater good. To just vote this guy out, I commend you. And, to say we did it. And that means something. But all I'm saying is, you don't have to wallow in that. It's like a battle. Not to be too dramatic, but I did have like the visual analogy of like, a person going off to war, a soldier going off to war, and you fought for however many years. Now it's like kind of peacetime. coming back and not knowing what are you going to do next, because your mind has been so entrenched in, battle and warfare. You don't have to continue it, though. You can let it go. And a lot of the soldiers who were able to come back and adapt, to everyday life did so by letting go of the past and looking, being involved in the present, and then looking towards a more constructive and beautiful future. And that's more important to me. What do I want the future to be? I touched on it a little bit on the previous episode, and that's been something that has been on my mind. There's a couple of books that I started reading today. One of them was titled Limitless Mind by Russell Targ. I finished that. And then I started Psychic Literacy by Ingo Swann. In both of those books, they touch upon the concept of time, and more specifically, quantum entanglement and non-local communications. And they say, Einstein says that time is relative or time is an illusion. Well, basically, they take it a step further. If time is an illusion, so is space. So you can, distance is an illusion, right? You can communicate with other minds, I guess psychically, non-locally. And what these two books did was document, circumstances, situations in which this very thing, had occurred. And the first book, Limitless Mind, actually gave you exercise in which you can practice things like remote, I forget what it's called, like remote something or another, remote viewing. And then, even being able to sort of conscious intuition, for lack of a better word. So I thought that was pretty interesting. And the arguments in these books are phrased in a way that it's like, you don't necessarily have to just take it in and say, okay, I believe everything that they're saying. But, there is some credibility to a lot of what they're saying, and I feel like we have been in the West conditioned to view reality in this one particular way. And I think it's boring, especially when there's so many psychic events that occur, where if it's, whether it's people having, quote, close encounters of, UFO sightings, that's what is termed, is what is termed, quote, supernatural. But is it really supernatural or is it natural? I mean, it seems like it's something that has always been reported. So it seems like these kind of phenomena are actually part of our everyday existence. Why is it called, or why is it considered to be supernatural when I forget how many millions of people, the writer Ingo Swann of Psychic Literacy, the second book that I started reading today, talked about, but he said it was like 20 million people or whatever have reported psychic phenomena in their daily life, whether it's seeing things that, kind of disappeared, whether it's, interacting with loved ones that have passed on, whether it's prophetic dreams. These things happen. These things are happening to people. And whether or not the, mainstream scientists consider it to be, quote, scientific or not, it doesn't matter. Like, reality is not the way we want it to be. Reality doesn't care what we think, it should be. It is what it is. And so when I hear stories or I read books or I interact with people who tell me interesting stories that kind of question the status quo as far as our perception of reality is concerned, I'm always fascinated to hear people's stories, because anything that makes me that builds a different construct of our present perception of reality is just fascinating to me. I had a friend of mine who told me a story about a couple of prophetic dreams that they had. Basically, they had a dream where they were like an American soldier that had infiltrated a Nazi camp. I'm paraphrasing off my memory, so it might not be quite precise. But and then he, got to this officer. The officer asked for his ID, and then he didn't have his ID, but the officer let him go anyway. And then he woke up, but he wrote the dream down. And then 2 weeks or 2 months later, he basically had the same exact experience in the sense of he was entering into a building, obviously not a Nazi camp, right? But everything else was there, right? He entering into a building, meeting up with an officer asking for his ID, him not having an ID, and then him being let through, and then, ending up in this like open field. So he dreamt about it, 2 months or 2 years prior to the fact, however long, I don't remember, and then had the experience. And he was like, most people I talk to about that, they think that it's crazy or whatever label you want to put on it. But I don't think so. I don't think the time is linear. And I'm like, I don't know if you read a lot about, what modern physicists are talking about, but just that's the prevailing ideology amongst a very small percentage of physicists, but they know their stuff. They know what they're talking about. The general public has a perception of what reality is of how reality is supposed to function, but that perception isn't true. And in fact, it has been proven otherwise by specialists in the field of physics. And so they say that, time is not linear. All of time is happening at once. And then in one of the books that I mentioned, I believe it was Limitless Mind, it talked about, I forget what terminology they used, but it was like preemptive dreams or whatever it is. But because of the way your dreams work, right? So let me say like today, let's say I went to the ice cream store. Do they have an ice cream store? Anyway, I went to the ice cream store, got a scoop of vanilla ice cream. I ate it, then I watched Star Trek and relaxed, and then I painted, and that was my day, right? And then when I go to sleep, my brain, what it does in dreams, right, is construct a narrative from all the visual input that it has seen throughout the day, and it creates a story. That's how the brain works, right? And the fact of the matter is, it's not going to recreate the day that I had, but it might put me in, let's say, in a parallel universe where I'm a guy and I'm being chased by ice cream and then my painting comes to life, right? But it's all these sort of aspects of a day that I had already experienced created, blended together to create a different narrative. But most people assume that the dreams that you're having, are nonsense. Or that they only deal with either your past or your present. But you have the same brain through time. So let's just say all of time is happening at once, which I've talked about this, several times, but all of time is happening at once. It means that the brain that you had in the past is the brain that you have now, is the brain that you have in the future, not will have. Okay? You already have in the future because your future is existing right now. If that's the case, then your future self is capable of communicating with you. These are facts. Also, it is possible for you to have one of those narrative dreams that are a construct of your future experience. So you might wake up today and have, some sort of crazy dream that seems crazy, and the narrative is insane. But if you write it down, the reason why you tend to have deja vu and that feeling of I've either experienced this before or I've dreamt it before, it's kind of a combination of both, except it's not you dreamt it before, you experienced it before. You've already experienced everything because everything you're going to experience, you've already experienced. So I'm going to say that again. It's not a matter of, okay, I feel like I've seen this before. I feel like I've experienced this before. You have already experienced it because all of your experiences are contained within the brain like a hologram, right? So, or a video game, or a CD-ROM. So if it skips, right, it's all still contained in that field, and that's how your brain works. So it is possible for you to dream of your future, or for your brain to construct a narrative dream of a future experience. I'll say that again. It is possible for your brain to construct a narrative dream of something that you will experience in the future. I think that if you get in the habit of writing your dreams out, you'll start noticing little things. Like, for example, there's one night I remember I need to get back in the habit of writing my dreams. I'm telling you guys to do it, and I don't, but I did for a while and then I stopped. But I'm going to do it again. But there was one night that I had a dream that, like, my cousin, his roommate, had like a girlfriend that was like Asian or something like that. And then we all were going to go play soccer, but the girlfriend like wanted to like hang out at the apartment instead. I never met his roommate before. That was just my dream. And then there was like this blonde lady in the dream who looked like somebody I knew in the waking life, and she was like talking to me. And but I haven't talked to that particular blonde lady that showed up in my dream in like a long time. And so I woke up and I was like, oh, that's weird. And then I talked to my cousin just randomly, like he texted me, and then we were talking, and I was like, yeah, the weirdest dream, like your roommate apparently who loved baseball, and then he like was dating this Asian girl. And then he was like, my cousin was like, wait, what? How did you even know that? Like, he is dating an Asian girl, and my roommate loves baseball. Like, he's obsessed. Like, he's got season tickets to the Padres or whatever. And I was like, oh, that's weird, because I just dreamt about that, like, you know, the night before. So it was like something like that happened. And then the blonde lady that was in my dream happened to be, you know, a person I hadn't spoken to like in a while. She texted me that same day when I woke up, and I was like, that's so weird. But stuff like that happens all the time. And I guess I could talk about it so like nonchalantly because it's become such a status quo of my life now. Like, it's just become normative. But I mean, it is normative. I think the more conscious you make yourself, you know, well, just the more conscious you make yourself and the more consciously you live, the more you're going to start picking up a lot of what's called synchronistic events, a lot of synchronicities. The weird thing that happens to me is like, I'll be thinking something and then somebody will say it, you know, exactly what I'm thinking will be echoed like in a podcast, right? Or in an audiobook I happen to be listening to, or one of the characters will say it on the TV show. And it's happening so often now that it's just like, I don't know what to make of it. It's super weird. When it happens, I just like go, okay, that's what's happening. And I just like keep it moving. But that's become normative, you know, or I'll think something and then it'll happen. And it's, you have to take my word for it. I'm not obviously doing anything with it because I'm not actively controlling it. I'm just noticing that the more I work on being conscious and still, the more I'm starting to experience a lot of these sort of, quote, abnormal, but actually normal, super normal, whatever you want to call it, experiences. And I'm just like learning to go with it and learning to listen. And all of a sudden, like, everybody becomes like a messenger and everybody becomes a teacher, and you become even much more, interested in what people have to say, because sometimes like I'll sit and I'll have a conversation with somebody, or they're talking to me, and they will say exactly what I might be dealing with something difficult that I haven't expressed to anybody. And then like this just happened to me actually on Wednesday. I was like dealing with something in my mind, and I didn't want to talk to anybody about it. And then my housekeeper, I was dealing with something in my mind on Tuesday and Monday. And then my housekeeper on Wednesday, like, she showed up for work and we started talking. And then all of a sudden she just started telling me about one of her clients who essentially went through something that I was sort of contemplating, and how it worked out for her. And I was just like, holy shit, like, what the fuck? It was like, and then it just like, things just got super normal and super intense. And I was just like, okay, I get the message, like a bit on the fucking nose, right? but she was talking to me. I didn't express to her like, oh my gosh, like I was really wondering about this, situation. I didn't express to her at all. But in my mind, I was like, that's so crazy. Like the fact that she's talking to me about this exact same thing that I was like worried about. But she's telling me about what somebody else who experienced the same thing, is going through. I was just like, this is wild. Like, so everybody becomes a messenger for the universe, and it's like everybody becomes one. I don't know. I don't know how else to say it. It's just everybody becomes some sort of vessel, or you just maybe just realize how much intertwined everything is. And I know the Buddhists have been saying this, and I know even, physicists, when they talk about, in quantum entanglement, they're saying it. But the more you live, the more consciously you live, the more prevalent these experiences become. And then it makes you even more conscious. And now all of a sudden, like I catch myself, like I don't even want to talk to people. I want to listen to what they have to say, because all of a sudden everybody sort of becomes this messenger that you can, learn from or whatever. And life just becomes even that much more vibrant and alive. And, like yesterday I was like sort of ecstatic, right? Because of obviously everything that happened. And then today, because I had peaked, right? And I mentioned this on I think the follow-up of my magic mushroom trip episode. That one seems to be the favorite. Everybody loves that episode, I don't know why. But I talked about how when you peak, right, emotionally, or you have a peak emotional experience, be mindful that what goes up has to come down. And sure enough, like I woke up today and I just felt like, just down. I had no reason to feel down. It was just as sunny yesterday as it was today. Everything was fine. But because I've been working on being more conscious and more mindful, I was able to watch my body react physiologically to essentially the come down of the high, the emotional high that I felt from being, the just feeling ecstatic that Trump was finally gone. And then when I watched that, it stopped me from reacting, right? And then it made me super aware of how I was feeling, and then allowed me to be able to articulate how I felt, right? Because all of a sudden I wasn't the emotion, which that was what it was, or it would have been in the past, right? When you feel angry, you become angry. All right, I'll say that again. When you feel an emotion, we tend, especially if you're not living consciously, when you feel something, you tend to become the emotion that you feel, right? Because you don't observe that feeling consciously, right? And because of my mindfulness exercises and just watching and just all the reading and everything that I've been doing, when I started feeling this sadness, I didn't allow the sadness to become me. I didn't become the sadness. I didn't, embody the sadness. I watched it, and then I applied sort of a rational, conscious thought to it, logical thought to it. Well, okay, you were feeling kind of high yesterday. So this is the, what's the word? What is it? What is that word when after you drink, next day, whatever, you know what I mean. However, this is the hangover. Yeah, this is the hangover from the emotional high from yesterday. And so when I was able to kind of watch that and feel that, I was like, okay, go. I know what's going on. And the moment I was like, I know what's going on, and then I allowed it to just be, and then I observed it, it kind of just dissipated. It disappeared. And I was like, that's interesting. Oh my God. It's not quite as simple as I'm explaining it to you, because it was I was in it, and it was a lot happening. But I just remember sitting and just watching how that felt, and then kind of shining a light on it and going, okay, all right, it doesn't feel pleasant. I wonder what's driving that. Okay, that was from yesterday. Okay, so I was feeling elated, earlier, this week, and this is the downside of that. And, this is the system, essentially, my body system trying to balance itself out. And so eventually I'll come back to sort of moderate. And then I'll be, tempered and, just talking through things, and it's a habit. But if you're conscious of a habit, it no longer controls you, so to speak. Everything is a type of addiction, isn't it? So yeah, but this world, man, this world is wild. Now it's funny, as I'm wrapping up, trying to get to what I really wanted to record, was something that came to my mind. In Biden's inaugural speech, he said, we need to root out the disease of white supremacy. It's not good. Obviously, of course, it's not good. Look at everything that has happened, the last 4 or 5 years because of the hate, and people's inability to see other people as equal. After he said that, people like Rand Paul and Karl Rove went on Fox News complaining that they felt personally attacked. Now, he didn't mention them by name. He just said, we're going to root out white supremacists. And somehow they took that personally, which to me, if you're a regular everyday person and somebody says, you know what, we need to root out, systemic white supremacy because of, gestures broadly at everything that has happened, you would be like, yeah, no, that makes sense. White supremacy is bad. But if you watch that and somehow that personally offended you, you got to kind of ask yourself, why did that personally offend you? Unless you fall under the category of white supremacists. And maybe they do. Clearly they do, because yes, they do. Okay. Ultimately, what it comes down to, and I'm only using politics as an analogy and a lead up to what I'm actually trying to say. When I saw that, I looked at that and I didn't have an emotional reaction. It didn't make me upset. It didn't make me angry. I was just interesting. And then the thought came to me about blood cells in the body. Okay, you have your human body is comprised of various cells. In your blood, we have the white blood cells and you have the red blood cells, right? So these are two, cells that perform different functions. And your white blood cells are obviously white, and then your red blood cells are red. They make your blood. Now, imagine if in your body, your white blood cells decided that because the red blood cells do not perform the same specific functions that the white blood cells perform, red blood cells are somehow inferior to the white blood cells and should be, attacked, eradicated, destroyed, right? That's actually a syndrome. It's actually a disease. It's an autoimmune disorder, wherein your white blood cells attack the red blood cells. I forget what the syndrome is, but it's a disease. It's a disorder and a disease, and it's crippling. And I thought about that. I said, we recognize, especially in medicine, that if in a body, one particular cell decides either I'm just going to grow exponentially without any regard to, all the other cells around me, right? That's a cancer. That's a tumor. It destroys the entire body if it's allowed to continue to proliferate unchecked. That's disease, right? We know that, okay? And then we know that if a white blood cell decides to attack a red blood cell, that's also disease, right? And it can be debilitating. It can have serious effects on the person, on the body. Okay. The Earth, this planet, is not a dead thing. It's not a rock. It's a living thing. It's a living entity. It's a being. Earth is. It has been embodied throughout different cultures, Mother Earth, Gaia, whatever, but it's not a rock. It's not a dead thing. It's not Mars or, Jupiter or whatever. And you could even argue that those planets might be alive in their own way. but this is a living planet, okay? I have never felt the spirit of this planet as strongly as I did when I went to the Big Island, and we went to like where the volcanoes had formed, like the new with the like the older eruptions. You touch the earth, and you feel something. If you take your shoes off and you plant your feet on the ground, not on pavement, but on earth, you feel something. I felt, and I'm not trying to sound like a hippie, and I don't know if I need to paraphrase myself, but you feel the spirit of earth. This planet is not a dead thing. It's not a dead entity. Okay, it's a conscious entity. It's a body. We call it the heavenly body, right? And each and every one of us serves a specific purpose, just like each and every ethnic group has its specific function. Just like the blood cells in your body, the white blood cells and the red blood cells, they all serve specific functions, and they all bring something to the table, and they have to work together for your body to remain healthy. Okay, if you eradicate all of your white blood cells, that's disease. If you eradicate all your red blood cells, that's disease, right? For your body to be healthy, there has to be a system of homeostasis maintained at all times. Okay, that's just for your physical body that you live in. Now take that and extrapolate it to the macro. Okay, and let's apply that mentality to the human race. Okay, so there are some white blood cells, white people, some who feel that their function on this body of earth is superior to all the other cells or selves that are of different colors. Okay, and as a result, they have sought to dominate them, right? We've seen that through history. It's one ethnic group, one racial group attempting to dominate another. And this is not, something that's unique to Europeans. Like, we've seen this through history. On my episode that I did called White Slavery, I kind of cataloged everything. The Slavs, the word even slave comes from the Slavic people who were enslaved by basically everybody. And then you have the Anglos and the Saxons that were enslaved by the Romans, and then the Greeks were enslaved by the Romans, and then the Egyptians, enslaved. They say that there's no evidence. There's no archaeological evidence of the enslavement of the Jews or Jewish people that's spoken of in the Bible. But ultimately, you had the Moors that enslaved the Spaniards. This has been just one ethnic group dominating another. And we can look back through history and see, that's disease. When we do that, when we behave in that way collectively, one cell or one group of cells, right, or selves, right, you can use that interchangeably, attacking others, that causes sickness, disease, right, suffering, pain, and it weakens the body earth, right? We have to look at that and learn from that, right? We have to look at history and say, how was this beneficial? And we look at our present time and say, look at what that ideology is doing. It is dangerous. We are attacking ourselves. So if you look even at just the country, the United States, right? What we experienced the last few, years has been a sort of an autoimmune disorder of different cells attacking each other. So you have blacks attacking whites. You have whites attacking black. You have, blacks like attacking whites. You have, and not necessarily physically, I mean like verbally, critically, whatever. You have, fascists versus Antifa, anti-fascists, which, I mean, obviously that's necessary. But you have Republicans versus Democrats. You have, this versus that, even Republicans versus Trump supporters. All of this infighting is similar to your body cells attacking themselves. And that is a sign of disease. All right. So if we can look at that situation in your body where if one group of cells decides to attack another group of cells, that would be considered disease, right? And you'd want to treat that. Then we have to take that same mindset and apply it to our country and apply it to this world and say, listen, we are engaging in behavior that constitutes disease, and this needs to stop. Nobody, no ethnic group, just like your cells in your body, like this is very elementary, okay? There's no one cell that's superior to the other. They all serve its own function, right? So your white blood cells do their part. Your skin cells do their part, right? Your red blood cells do their part. The cells of your organs, they all have their roles to play, and one isn't your brain cells. You can say, oh, okay, well, you could be a brain cell, and you could be like, well, I'm the brain, but, you need me to function. Okay, to a certain point, but if, all your other cells kind of decide to stop functioning, the brain's going to suffer, okay? So there's no one group of cells in your body that can exist on its own. It needs to work together. That's the sign of health. When all of the cells in your body are working, collectively towards a greater good, right? That's health. So when you look at humanity and you look at cultures that are at war with each other, and you look at humanity as a whole and the human race and see what we have done to each other and what we continue to do to each other, you kind of have to look at that and say, this is a sign of disease. This cannot be allowed to continue. Otherwise, we will destroy ourselves and we will destroy this planet, right? You have the rich taking advantage of the poor. You have corporations taking advantage of workers. Like you look at everything. People are driven by greed, right? And as a result, we're seeing, the consequence. That's our planet. It's sick. This, all of what we're doing and what we're seeing, right? What we're seeing is a consequence of what we've done to each other in the past. At a certain point, you have to kind of wake up and look up and say, humanity is in a state of disease, right? And we're not Earth. You're not your own planet. I mean, I guess you could argue that your body is, but you're not your own planet, okay? You are on this planet, right? We have a responsibility, one, to get our shit together, humanity, the human race, and cut the bullshit. This whole, and I don't care what group you're from. Nobody is superior to anybody else, just like a white blood cell isn't superior to a red blood cell, right? We all have our functions to perform in order for this planet to be healthy. And right now, if you aren't a part of that, the solution, right, to healing our planet, which has suffered through, if you look through civilization, it's just been continuous, attacking one another, right? That's a disorder, right? So if you're not part of the solution to say, okay, let's pretend that you are a white blood cell, okay? I'm a white blood cell. I'm not going to attack a red blood cell because there's no way I can attack a red blood cell and be okay, because by attacking this red blood cell or these group of red blood cells, I'm also damaging the body that I fucking live in, right? So if the body dies, right, from disease, then me as a white blood cell ceases to exist, right? Same, right? If you have children, if you love children, if you are optimistic about the future, right, you have to understand that same mentality applies. If we continue to attack each other, one demographic, against each other, one country against each other, right? Eventually what's going to happen is the same thing that happens if a person has an autoimmune disorder and their white blood cell decides to start attacking the red blood cells, right? The body suffers, right? And then the cells in themselves also suffer all the consequences of disease that comes with that. Okay, like it or not, we're in this together, and we really have to stop being so myopic and thinking that we can just sort of behave however we want without consequence. You can't hurt other people without hurting yourself, right? I love the cell analogy because it's so fitting, right? If I'm a white blood cell and I attack a red blood cell for no reason, I'm hurting myself. I'm hurting the body that I'm a part of, and I'm behaving in an unnatural way. That is what disease is. It's an abnormality. So what we have become accustomed to in our reality is that system of constantly attacking one another, but that's not normal, right? That's disease. And somehow we've become comfortable with living in a diseased state, right? Somehow we have become comfortable with living in a diseased state. And that's not good, right? That's not good. So, this is something that we collectively need to work on that. And I don't know what I was watching. I think it was Sense8. I'm watching that and toggling between Sense8 and Star Trek Voyager. But there was this one character on Sense8 that was like a Buddhist monk. She had like a giant tree in the back of her head. I'm guessing that was the tree of life. Her head was shaved. And she said, you can't change the world unless you change yourself, or something to that effect. And it's like, we've all heard that before, right? Be the change you want to see, right? If you want to clean the world, start with your own front lawn, so to speak. And I like that sentiment, and I think it should be, really focused on. I can't tell other people not to do X or not to do Y, and I hope that, that's not what this podcast is coming off as, because that's not my intent. I can't tell you what to do. I can only tell you what I'm trying to do, right? I'm in the world, right? I'm a red blood cell, right? And if I'm looking around and I'm seeing white blood cells attacking red blood cells and red blood cells attacking white blood cells, and I as red blood cell has also been participating in attacking other cells, I'm part of the problem, right? So all I can do is stop, and set that example. And then hopefully if other people see how I'm doing, or how I'm living, what I'm doing, they can look at that and say, okay, well, that seems to be normative, right? Let's try that, right? But you got to start with yourself. I think going on social media and attacking people who don't think like you, whether or not it's warranted, eventually makes you sick, right? Once again, it's like the white blood cell, red blood cells. If I'm attacking something that's different from me, we're still the same, but I just perceive it as different only because of a variation in pigment or a variation in ideology or perception. These are little tiny things. Like, what is a thought anyway? What is a belief? You can't grasp a belief, right? It's something in your head. You can't grasp it. It's not tangible, right? So it's one little tiny thing that you can't even grasp that separates me from this person over there. And here I am attacking that person. Okay, I'm in this body. I'm in this cell. I'm in this human. I'm not human. I'm on this planet, right? And it's all energy. It's all energy. And energy affects like everybody. So one of the books that I mentioned, I believe it's called Psychic Literacy. It talks about that, about how we're all interconnected. Okay. And whether you're conscious of it or not, we're all operating in this. It's all energy, right? Like I can look, you ever had that experience where you're staring at somebody, right? And then they turn around and look you dead in your soul because they felt that. They felt your energy. They felt your energy of your concentration, right? So everything is energy, right? Emotions are energy in motion. If you walk into a room where people have been angry, you can feel that anger, right? If you walk into a situation where everybody's jovial and you're in a bad mood, you find yourself happy soon enough, right? And it's not, once again, it's not, anger isn't something you can touch. It's intangible, but it's energy, right? Sadness, happiness, these aren't things that you can necessarily touch, but you can feel them, right? So how are you changing the environment on this planet? What are you doing to affect these sort of energetic waves that are influencing the behaviors of other people? If you're constantly negative, you are creating a negative state in the body that is Earth, in the body that is the collective, in the body that affects other humans, in the body that affects animals, right? Animals respond to energy, right? Animals who, animals, like, they can sense when a person is a negative person. They tend to kind of, avoid them. What are they picking up on that we can't? Like, they do that instinctively, and we obviously haven't figured out how to do that yet, or at least a lot of people haven't. There are some people who actually can do that, which is why I'm reading a lot of the books that I've been reading, because I want to learn about these, people. So what energy are you giving off? Because the energy that you're putting out, right, is what affects the state of this earth. Are you contributing to it? Are you contributing to negativity? Right? Well, if that's the case, you can't harm other people, right, without harming yourself. I can't go and start criticizing other people without putting myself in a state of criticism. And that tends to then get internalized, because now I've made myself a critical person, right? In order for me, I've said this in other episodes before, but I'll say it again. In order for me to put out an energy that is negative, I need to first generate it. So it's like a Mortal Kombat, like the energy, right, comes through you first, right? Matter isn't, energy isn't created or destroyed, it's just modified. So energy is there, right? And then you pull it into yourself, and then you transmute it from, let's say, neutral to either positive or negative. But that has to come through you. You're the generator. And then it goes out there. It goes out. It goes out as vitriol. It goes out as anger. It goes out as, sadness. But it goes out, but it has to come through you first. So you cannot harm other people without harming yourself and without harming the world. So a lot of conspiracy theorists, and I don't mean that in a derogatory term, I just mean that's, they have this word, they call it the Great Reset. I don't know if I necessarily believe in what they're saying, but it is what it is. But I think, if anything, we're at the beginning of the year, it's the beginning of a new presidency, and I'm seeing a lot of positive changes, and I'm just wondering if we can't all use this circumstance, something that we just went through, and not to go back to that, right? We can collectively, one person at a time can collectively say, I'm not going to feed into that negativity. I'm not going to feed that negative energy anymore. We've done it for 5 years. Have we emerged better from it? Yes, we have learned. We've learned a lot. But the thing is, now, what do you do with that knowledge? You take that knowledge and just continue repeating the same things? Or do we go, okay, we do have a problem in this country of just, attacking others and criticizing others for just being who they are, right? Being gay, being trans, being a person of color, being a woman. And we've seen the consequences of that hate, right? But transmuting that hate, of other people's negative behavior at them, saying, okay, I hate you because you are this or that, isn't gonna, it's still, that energy is still there. You're not mitigating that energy. right? It's not going to change anything. Hating somebody for being hateful, the energy is still being generated. It doesn't matter your reason, because once again, reasoning is also another intangible. Doesn't matter what your reasoning behind you hating a person for being hateful, right? It just still generates an activity, and then it harms you. They are what they are. And there are a lot more of us that are going to learn that that's not healthy, and that's not good. And then we will adjust our behavior to become, to create the future that exists as a probability now, which is a one where we all sit back and we go, okay, we're all humans and we all have something to bring to the table. So instead of attacking and saying one race is more supreme than the other, or one gender is more supreme than the other, let's see what each, party brings to the table, and let's work together collectively towards healing our planet, towards a greater good, towards a future for our children and our grandchildren, towards a future that you're probably going to reincarnate, even if you don't have kids or don't give a shit about your future kids. If everything that has been written on reincarnation and infinite return is true, you're probably going to get sent back here. So you want to be mindful of, okay, what future am I trying to come back? Am I creating? Because the future that I'm creating now is what I'm going to reincarnate back into. Not me personally. I'm not coming back here. In fact, I'm doing everything in my power to not come back here. Hence all the crazy reading. But what future are you leaving for other people to come back to? Because think about it. Think about the fact, and I'll leave you with this. Think about the fact that you have people who are deeply religious and they believe a lot of things as a result of what people 2,000 years ago wrote. Right? Like the people who wrote the Bible thousands of years ago are still influencing people's reactions now. Like watching the behavior of people, on those videos of the insurrection and their, and then seeing how the QAnon supporters, they keep pushing back that goalpost where they're saying, the inauguration was the date that, Trump became president. And then even after reality was like, no, that's not what's going to happen. That's not what happened. Now they've pushed it. Now they're saying March is like the date. And just, it's like one story after another. When I saw all that play out, it made me think about, Christ, the story of Christ. And then he got crucified. And then they were like, no, he didn't really die. It's like, okay, but he did. And then they were like, no, he actually came back from the dead. And then, okay, but he didn't. No, yes, he totally did. And then he's going to come back and he's going to destroy the Roman Empire or whatever. And to know that people in that time actually thought that the rapture was going to occur, because that, if you read the Bible, that's what it says. Like people alive who are alive now are going to see Christ coming again in his splendor. And then when that didn't happen, they just moved it to the next generation and the next generation and the next generation. So the actions of people 2,000 years ago, 3,000 years ago, have rung through history, echoed through history to affect people now. Right now in the present. You can't say that there's no correlation, there's no connection. They are. It's absolutely. So then if people in the past can negatively impact people in our present and also in the future, we are somebody's past. We are living in some generation's past, right? So what we do now will resonate and echo through and is affecting those in the future right now. So we need to behave as though what we do now, our actions now, matter, because they absolutely do. We have to start perceiving reality in that way, not time being a one-way street. It's not. Time is not linear. Time is not a one-way street. We're all interconnected. One of my friends used a yarn analogy. It's like a rolled up ball and everything's touching, and everything's influencing everything else. Your future can influence the past, and the past can influence the future. It all matters on what we do right now. Thanks for listening.